Grazie ai fotografi. Magari poi c'è un po' di spazio per foto anche alla fine. E poi so che comunque i relatori di oggi sono disponibili per interviste e con loro anche gli altri protagonisti del film che sono qui in sala. Buongiorno a tutti, benvenuti per questo incontro per certi versi inusuale di presentazione di un documentario, The Letter, frutto della collaborazione tra il Movimento Laudato Si, il Dicastero per il Servizio allo Sviluppo Umano Integrale. Insieme a YouTube Originals, la produzione è affidata a una società di eccellenza nel settore, la Off Defense. Il film, attraverso l'incontro tra i 4 protagonisti e il Papa, ripercorre alcuni temi della lettera enciclica Laudato Si, ma saranno i relatori di oggi a spiegarlo meglio, a raccontare il film, l'origine, come si è sviluppato. E diamo oggi il benvenuto a Sua Eminenza, il Cardinale Michael Czerny, prefetto del Dicastero per il Servizio allo Sviluppo Umano Integrale, e con lui ad alcuni dei protagonisti di questo lavoro. Il dottor Ho-Sung Lee, presidente del gruppo intergovernativo di esperti sul cambiamento climatico, Cacique Odair Dada Borari, che vedremo nel film, capo generale del territorio indigeno Marò da Pará in Brasile, la dottoressa Lorna Gold, recentemente presidente del Consiglio di amministrazione del Movimento Laudato Si, impegnata da anni nella promozione di un rapporto sano con l'ambiente, e Nicholas Brown, scrittore e regista del film. A loro darei anzitutto la parola, appunto, per entrare più nel dettaglio del lavoro che è stato fatto, iniziato ormai 4 anni fa, se non sbaglio, e darei innanzitutto la parola a Sua Eminenza, che ringrazio di essere qui.
Thank you very much, and hello to everyone. In 2015, Pope Francis released his great encyclical letter, Laudato Si. It has surely had a widespread impact on the global stage, as many commentators testified, and in the Church at large. And yet, in the 7 years since then, the environment crisis of our common home has worsened drastically, as Dr. Ho-Sung Lee from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change will explain in a few moments. A few years ago, the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development began to collaborate with filmmaker Nicholas Brown and Off the Fence Productions, with the Laudato Si movement and the Dicastery for Communication to create this documentary film conveying the messages of Laudato Si. The idea of a letter provides the film's title. Laudato Si is an encyclical, a letter of the Pope traditionally passed from church to church. Second, our dicastery sent a letter to the film's protagonists, inviting them to dialogue with the Holy Father. Dialogue is crucial for humanity's peace with the Creator, with all creation, and among us humans. For this dialogue to be authentic, all voices should be heard. But voices from the peripheries are usually ignored in global summits and environmental decision-making, typically dominated by powerful corporate interests. In the peripheries, the voices of youth, the poor, indigenous people, and even wildlife usually languish unheard. Instead, in this case, remarkable leaders were invited, first in conversation with Pope Francis in Rome, and then sharing their personal stories via this film, and now powerfully showing that the ecological crisis is happening now. The time is over for speculation, skepticism, and denial, and certainly for irresponsible populism. Apocalyptic floods, mega droughts, disastrous heat waves, catastrophic cyclones and hurricanes have become the new normal. They continue today. Tomorrow, they will get worse. From climate disruption and environmental degradation flow loss of lives and livelihoods, forced displacement, and violent conflict. These are not challenges that anyone can resolve alone. As the film, The Letter proposes, the world needs inclusive encounters between people from different rooms of our common home to learn from each other and develop real solutions. In his letter, Laudato Si, Pope Francis says, "I would like to enter into dialogue with all people about our common home." The film, The Letter, provides such an encounter and dialogue. This beautiful film, heartbreaking yet hopeful, is a clarion cry to people everywhere. Wake up, get serious, meet, act together, act now. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Eminence, for giving us a bit of the background that brought to the creation of this movie. And thank you for highlighting this aspect of a letter circulated and passed on from person to person, from heart to heart, in what you described as a conversation ongoing on the future of the planet. In this respect, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has been at the heart of efforts to save the environment and our common home since I believe, the end of the 80s. And its work is crucial today in identifying and facing the challenges His Eminence just mentioned. I gladly pass the floor to President Husung Lee, the President of the Intergovernmental Panel, and I thank him for his presence here today.
Thank you very much. Today is a special day for the alliance between science and faith. As a representative of the scientific community, I'm thrilled to celebrate today two important milestones of the journey of the faith community to tackle the climate crisis. First, we celebrate the release of the film, The Letter, which powerfully tells the story of the encyclical letter Laudato Si. 7 years after Pope Francis wrote such a letter to all people of goodwill, this is a timely reminder of the urgency and importance of Laudato Si. It also is a great joy to see how the role of science gets such a big spotlight in the film through the story of Dr. Greg Asner and Dr. Robin Martin, a husband and wife team. Their groundbreaking research and mapping of coral reefs take place at the very front lines of the climate and biodiversity crisis. The IPCC assessments indicated that coral reefs ecosystems are first in line to suffer catastrophic losses if greenhouse gas emissions remain unchecked and we cross the 1.5 degrees Celsius global temperature increase within the near future. In fact, as the film illustrates, such destruction of corals is happening right now in front of our eyes, very eyes, or rather in front of the eyes of scientists, as Dr. Asner and Dr. Martin. Pope Francis says in the film that, quote, "The theology in Laudato Si is in dialogue with science. Today, you could never practice theology without a dialogue with science," unquote. In fact, the encyclical itself is grounded, and I quote, "on the results of the best scientific research available today, which touches deeply and provide a concrete foundation for the ethical and spiritual itinerary that follows," unquote. This dialogue between faith and science is one we are eager to continue deepening. Most important, perhaps, is the appeal from both the encyclical letter and the cinematic letter for a new dialogue about how we are shaping the future of our planet, unquote. For we need, quote, "for we need a conversation which includes everyone, since the environmental challenge we are undergoing and its human roots concern and affect us all." This is from the Laudato Si, paragraph 14. The IPCC assessments clearly point out that climate impacts and risks are becoming increasingly complex and more difficult to manage, and that accelerated and equitable climate action in mitigating and adapting to climate change is critical to sustainable development. In that regard, we warmly welcome the Holy See's official entry into the Paris Agreement on climate change, which comes into force today. The Holy See's final commitment to this international body injects new momentum into the global race to implement solutions to the climate crisis. Our actions today will shape how people adapt and nature responds to increasing climate risks. I want to remind you that the next few years will be critical. There are ways to improve our chances of success. I should stress that international cooperation is key to achieving ambitious climate goals. Both the science community and faith community are very clear. The planet is in crisis and its life support systems are in peril. The stakes have never been higher, and we should be the source of the solution to this crisis. May the world receive this letter with an open heart and open mind. Thank you very much.
Grazie Presidente Lee, grazie per le sue parole, per aver parlato di questa alleanza tra scienza e fede, anche per aver ricordato alcuni dei rischi che corriamo e che si trovano all'interno del film, si vedono all'interno del film. E grazie per aver ricordato anche che oggi, un po' per caso, forse per grazia, è il giorno in cui la Santa Sede è inclusa tra i firmatari del Trattato di Parigi. Davvero, come diceva, è il tempo di misure reali, per usare anche le parole della Chiesa, questo non può che passare per la conversione di ciascuno, che nel Signore possa trovare un orientamento, che ne faccia un servitore di tutti gli uomini e di tutto l'uomo. Un invito al cuore dell'enciclica del Papa. Grazie per le sue parole e diamo ora la parola al regista di questo grande lavoro, a Nicholas Brown, whose precious work brought to the documentary we will all have the pleasure of watching this afternoon. Please, Director, a word on the work that has been done.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here, and I want to thank my colleagues at Off the Fence, and especially want to thank all the contributors who have come back to Rome. We, as Cardinal Czerny mentioned, this exercise has been one of getting outside of our bubbles and meeting each other across the planet. And we have with us the four voices in the film here in Rome. So if you do have a chance, please meet with them. We have the voice of wildlife, which is Greg and Robin, who are sat here. The voice ambassador for the poor, who is Aruna, who's from Senegal, sat there in the audience. We have Chief Dada, who's come all the way from Brazil, where they're having an election. And we have Redima. Where's Redima? Where are you? There you are in the middle, yeah, who is the voice of the youth. These voices are important, largely because their perspectives are those of who suffer the most, who are on the front lines, and have, I think, the most experience to tell us that, reality, as in the real climate change, is outstripping even, potentially even science is catching up. We keep on getting surprised by events like, we were just discussing, there's Pakistan and there's the hurricanes in America. There's some events that I wasn't even aware of. It's hard to keep up. That is because reality has outstripped us. And that is why we need to come together as a human race and meet together. That's what the encyclical offers. And I think the Pope has, with his book, intuited the moment by which we all should have a discussion and put down any sort of differences or apparent illusions of otherness and come together. I hope that's clear. As an artist, it is a great privilege to be able to work with such talented people and such amazing stories. And I thank them for their stories, and I hope you enjoy the movie. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you for your work in putting together the various elements of this story, as well as, I'm sure, the talents and the human interaction as well that is required at many levels. The best expression in this respect is probably to see a few minutes of this work. Allora pregherei I colleghi di trasmettere il trailer del film The Letter.
Releases Pope Francis's wildly anticipated encyclical on the environment.
La naturaleza grita. Deténganse. Deténganse. Réfugiés climatiques, un manque de la protection de la nature qui pousse aujourd'hui de nos populations à quitter chez nous.
É perder a terra, a floresta, o grande agronegócio que está chegando aí.
Marine heat waves are causing an unknown amount of death among corals.
I want all the global leaders to do something to stop climate change, because if it's not going to be stopped, it's going to harm our future.
Queridos poetas sociales, porque ustedes son poetas sociales porque tienen la capacidad y el coraje de crear esperanza allí donde solo aparece descarte y exclusión. Je n'arrive pas à rester tranquille. Parfois, j'ai un esprit qui voyage.
O mundo vai mudar. Porque o que estava encoberto, hoje está sendo descoberto.
Il faut lisser des liens très forts et il ne faut jamais rompre ce lien.
You are my hero, you are.
Che nessuno di noi è un'isola. Abbiamo tutti bisogno gli uni degli altri. Wondema, pour himbe mbaɗa protéger l'environnement.
Try to be the change you want to see in the world.
We arrived as individuals with very different stories, but we all shared a dream.
Bene. Alcune immagini, a rivederle, a ripensare anche agli eventi dei giorni scorsi feriscono ancora, quindi come invece fa piacere vedere questi 4 giovani che si riuniscono e che incontrano il Santo Padre. Grazie ai colleghi tecnici che rendono questo possibile oggi e sempre durante questi incontri. Diamo ora la parola a uno dei protagonisti del film, cacique Odair Dada Borari, che da servitore del suo popolo e della sua terra, come ogni vero capo, nel film si interroga con il Papa su questo suo impegno. Parlerà in portoghese. La traduzione simultanea, come sempre nel corso di queste conferenze stampa, è accessibile tramite il collegamento Zoom alla conferenza stessa con le vostre cuffiette personali, utilizzando i vostri apparecchi, bene, di collegamento. Prego, la parola a Chief Dada. Thank you for being here.
Tá, obrigado a todos e a todas que se fazem presente. Nesse momento, quero dedicar aqui a voz da floresta, né, da natureza. Eu sou o cacique Dada Borari, indígena Maró, município de Santarém, oeste do Pará. É com muito prazer que estou aqui para, mais uma vez, falar em nome da floresta, em nome da população indígena, que no qual hoje luta por clamor, por justiça. Venho aqui trazer a demanda, a expectativa para que nossos indígenas eles possam ser valorizados e ouvidos pela sociedade mundial. Porque hoje a gente sofremos na pele com a perca da floresta. Então nós não queremos ver a floresta acabada. Nós queremos o verde, porque vida está nela. E uma vez ela estando verde, significa para nós muita esperança, muita vida, porque eu, que sou defensor de direitos humanos, protegido pela polícia, desde 2006, venho sofrendo na pele perseguições, consequências, por defender a floresta viva. Espero, deixo minhas lembranças para que todos os presidentes de todos os países, independente de quem quer que seja, que todos possam unir em uma só luta e defender a floresta. Porque a floresta hoje, ela está pedindo socorro. E para nós manter ela sempre viva, ela não depende só do indígena. Ela depende de todos. principalmente de todos os nossos presidentes, governantes de vários países. Vamos fazer essa união, porque a destruição da Amazônia é a poluição em outros países. Então, ajuda nós a proteger. Nós aqui estamos clamando por justiça. Muito obrigado a todos.
Grazie, Chief Dada, per le tue parole, per il tuo impegno, per aver portato qui e nel film la vita della tua terra, la foresta e della tua gente. Conosciamo l'importanza di questo polmone della terra che tu chiami casa, per l'aria che respiriamo, ma anche per la ricchezza culturale e non solo della terra che abitiamo. Davvero oggi ci aiuti anche a ritoccarlo con mano. E diamo ora la parola a Lorna Gold del movimento Laudato Si. Thank you, Lorna, for being here with us today.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be here this morning, and it's the culmination of many years' work of the Laudato Si movement in collaboration with Off the Fence, with the Dicastery, and with many, many other partners. The essence of this film, or the purpose of the film, is to bring Laudato Si, this wonderful book, to new audiences. And the intention of Pope Francis in writing Laudato Si was to reach every person on the planet. Now, we all know that not every person on the planet, certainly people under a certain age, or perhaps people who maybe don't know what a papal encyclical is, are not going to read this. So how to reach, how to get that message out? And that's the reason why this idea came to make a film, make a documentary film. But as Nicholas, when we talked to him about it, the expert in storytelling, said, there's no plot. How can we make a film about something that doesn't have a plot? So with the great creativity of Off the Fence, of Nicholas, we reached out, because the way to tell the story of Laudato Si is almost to turn it inside out, to tell it from the peripheries and to start the process of dialogue that Pope Francis so urgently calls for. So this is a book, this is a film now about dialogue between different voices and how to come together for our common home. As both a protagonist in the film, or I'm in the film, it has been really about daring to hope, and that's the message that comes out very strongly from the film. The world is in deep crisis, and we could repeat many crises that are deepening every day. But the message of the film that resonates so strongly is that there is hope, and hope comes when we come together and when we start to build the bridges and alliances that enable us to hope again. It's by no coincidence that this film is being launched on the feast of St. Francis of Assisi. For Pope Francis calls each of us, and the film really calls each of us, to a profound and urgent change of heart. And on this feast of St. Francis of Assisi, I think that that's the key message that comes from this press conference and from this film, is that we need to develop and rediscover the capacity to care for each other, to be able to dream that we can build a society in a world where we care for each other and care for the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorna. Grazie. Thank you, Nicholas, for finding a plot. Grazie a Lorna per le tue parole, che ci riportano anche a quello che ogni cristiano, ogni cattolico, forse anche ogni essere umano può fare per questa casa comune che tutti abitiamo. Grazie anche per questo sforzo di trovare i modi nuovi, originali, per raggiungere tutti i destinatari dell'enciclica del Papa. Grazie per il vostro impegno, lo dico anche pensando a Tomas, a Cecilia e a tutti gli altri del movimento che sono qui in sala oggi o che ci seguono da altre parti nello sforzo di portare avanti l'organizzazione di oggi. Li saluto con affetto. Grazie quindi ai relatori di oggi che hanno parlato fino ad ora, ma apriamo la possibilità ai giornalisti di fare le domande. Molto bene. Chiederei sempre ai giornalisti di presentarsi, nome e testata, e di dire a chi è rivolta la loro domanda. Austin, welcome back. To see you.
Thank you. Austin Ivory, I write for various people, Commonweal, America, and so on. My question is really for Cardinal Jenny and Lorna above all, but for anybody. 7 years after Laudato Si, the reception of that message in the worldwide Catholic Church has been patchy at best, sometimes indifferent, sometimes a lot of resistance. Where do you think that resistance comes from? How do you believe we can overcome it? And how do you think this film could be used, should be used in dioceses and parishes to help get that message across? E se posso fazer uma pergunta em português para o Sassiki, com a mudança de governo agora no Brasil possível, qual é a mensagem do Senhor para o novo governo do Brasil e também para a Igreja do Brasil neste momento de crise na Amazônia? Thank you.
Molto bene. Cominciamo forse dalla domanda per Lorna e per Sua Eminenza, e poi ladies first, it seems.
On one level, I think you're right, Austin. It has been patchy, and I think it's perhaps, I don't know all the answers and the reasons for that, is perhaps that the church has also been affected by a sense of silos, that somehow the environmental question is not generally seen amongst the wider Catholic population, and I would say also by many clergy, as something of central importance. And now there could be theological reasons why that might have been the case, which His Eminence might be able to speak to. But I think that takes time to percolate down and to land in different communities. Also because there are many other concerns and pressing concerns within the churches. However, the Laudato Si movement, together with, is a great alliance of organizations. There's over 900 Catholic organizations affiliated to the Laudato Si movement. And over the past 7 years, tens of thousands of people have been trained as animators of Laudato Si in their communities. And that is leading to a groundswell. So I really see that this message of Laudato Si is very much coming from the grassroots. It's coming from the laity, the people of God, and also with the religious as well, in particular, the religious sisters playing a very prophetic role in Laudato Si and bringing that to life. How we change that, I think, is through continuing to develop initiatives to bring the message of Laudato Si out, and the Laudato Si movement through this film has a global campaign now of community screenings. And it's one of the things that we would really like to see through the film, is that whilst it will be available free to view from this evening on YouTube or YouTube Originals, that people would come together in different communities, so in their parishes, in their local associations, their schools, to have a similar dialogue to the one that you'll see in the film, because it's set up for dialogue, and we can have those dialogues in our own communities.
Thank you, Lorna. Your Eminence.
Maybe one of the enemies of Laudato Si is the word green. The danger of categorizing it as a green document or green appeal, and therefore putting it aside because one has already found a way of setting that concern aside, or say that's not my option, and so it's marginal. And I think maybe that's one way of asking. Another would be to ask yourself and your colleagues as journalists, I mean, why do you find it hard to write about this? Why don't you bring it to our attention? Why don't you tell the stories that would lead to more action? you have the same dynamics going on among you as church leaders and church participants. So let's all work on figuring out what the obstacles are. It's not a question of the church applying a policy. It's deeper than that. And finally, I think the word conversion is used many times in these contexts. In fact, it has a sort of secular engineering title and meaning. It's a means to change the purpose or function of something to something else. That's what a conversion is. But if we use the word conversion, then I think we have to acknowledge that we're sinners. Otherwise, the word doesn't really mean anything. And that's something that we're very reluctant to do. In general, not just these sins, but all sins are function so effectively in our lives and in the world because they're hidden. They're hidden. That's the way they work. So what are the sins? And what as writers, of course, you write about our sins, but as persons, you could also ask yourself about my sins, and church leaders could do the same. And I think so I'm very hopeful that the film will bring Laudato Si into places and amongst people who haven't, as Lorna says, opened the book. But I also hope that the many different factors will come together so that we start taking this more seriously and more deeply, more universally. And maybe the important thing when one is ready to say, well, it's hopeless or it's ideological or it's a fad, bring the question home. Why am I unwilling to change? What is it that I'm protecting or defending?
Perhaps Nicholas would like to add something about it.
Just to add to that, Austin, to answer your question as well, I want to give a shout out to YouTube and the function of YouTube. This is a commercially produced film, and normally one would hide this sort of a product behind a paywall. But this film will be available from 6:30 tonight, free for everyone to watch. And I think that's of critical importance that, as long as we keep getting the word out, people are free to enjoy it, free to share it. And hopefully that will also help proliferate the message.
Perhaps it will help people ask those questions that His Eminence.
Indeed.
Chief Dada, I think there was a question also for you. Obrigado.
Então, só respondendo, né? Assim, a nossa expectativa enquanto população indígena do Brasil e de outras partes do mundo, que não é uma resposta somente minha, né? Mas isso é a dor de todo, é o clamor de todo. A gente esperamos, como nesse processo de tramitação, né, de novo presidente da República no Brasil, para que esse novo presidente pense que o desenvolvimento do Brasil, da Amazônia, o que já foi desmatado, basta nisso. Vamos pensar em outro tipo de desenvolvimento. É possível a gente fazer outro tipo de desenvolvimento para o Brasil, não desmatando mais floresta, não derrubando mais nem um pé de árvore, porque isso é muito triste para nós. Então, eu vejo que é possível construir uma nova política para que o Brasil possa desenvolver em outra expectativa. É muito desmatamento, chega, a gente não consegue mais ter sossego. Então, acho que tem que construir, sim, uma nova política, dependendo de qual presidente quer que seja, que vai gerenciar e coordenar o Brasil diante dessa eleição aí que virá.
Obrigado. Vediamo se ci sono altre domande. Carol, please.
Carol Glatz, Catholic News Service. I'd like to know if there were any plans to have Pope Francis see the documentary, and what in particular advice do you give to people when it comes to action? Because there has been a lot of talk for many years. Do you give indications in the film, or are there things you would like to relay to people, ways they can act today?
I would presume those were questions for His Eminence Cardinal Czerny.
I don't know that there's a particular plan for Pope Francis to see the film, but maybe he will. Really, the action. Yes, we all. Yes, finally, it is the question: what can be done, what should be done. But I think the film is acting at the level of getting people to ask the question for themselves, which is finally the only way that you can come upon the needed action. The one way of putting it is that the only step that I should be considering is my next step, and that my next step depends on a million factors, and so it's up to me to, and then up to us, and that's why the dialogue is so important, to identify that that possible action. And I think even as you look at this this collection of spokespersons for the film, you see that there's hope of next steps at many different levels and many different sectors of society, and that I think is also so important that no, well, you could put it this way, that no room in our common home considers itself exempt or feels that it has nothing to offer. On the contrary, we all have next steps possible, but we have to find what they are and have the energy, the grace to take that next step. And I think the film also makes it clear that taking one step will generate others. So you don't have to worry about the whole trip, but just the next step.
May want to, speaking of next steps, and we may want to turn the same question also to Lorna and to President Lee, perhaps.
Yes, thank you very much. I haven't seen the film, obviously, yet, and I hope that the film sends a powerful message linking the global challenge to the personal challenge we face every day, personal sufferings and personal opportunities. And I think the greatest challenge in resolving climate issues is to find a way to link the global common goods to the personal and understanding at the level of personal challenge. So far, we haven't got that link clearly established. I hope that this film should be able to narrow the gap between that two important matters. Second thing I always thought is that I'm an economist in background, and I reviewed all kinds of literature in doing this IPCC, and I found that the Laudato Si, the key messages of Laudato Si clearly illustrates what the limits of science that we understand perfectly well. And Laudato Si clearly touches upon the fundamental issues of this global climate change. We have dealt a number of issues scientifically, but I must say to you that most of the solutions we present deal with the symptomatic treatment. And Laudato Si touches upon what are the roots of these problems. And I think if we understand that, the message, I'm sure we will be closer to resolving these climate issues.
And just finally from me to say that there is a website for the film which has calls to action included in it, and that's theletterfilm.org. And one of the calls to action is to host screenings and to enter into dialogue at a local level with your community on what action can be taken, because it's different for different parts of the world. And then for those who are interested, they can engage with the Laudato Si Action Platform, which is a global initiative to ask Catholic communities of every size and every type to prepare Laudato Si action plans. So very practically, to take a holistic approach at your community level on how your community is going to address these issues of climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution. So it's very practical.
Thank you, Lorna.
I'll just add that when I, as a secular person reading the Laudato Si, I found it a little bit like a self-help book. And in that respect, I think that when one talks about what one can do to echo what Cardinal Czerny is saying, is that it's a lot of times we focus on what we can do, which is obviously important. And there are many, many technocratic aims that very clever people have put together. Sometimes we've been missing from that conversation why we must do this. And the only real answer that one finds when one looks to why is to look internally and to look at thoughts of your family, your children, your legacy, your purpose on earth. And those moral questions are better addressed by moral leadership often than by technocratic leadership. So I guess that's how I see it.
Thank you, Nicholas. Se non ci sono altre domande, forse possiamo magari chiederei ai relatori un attimo una foto per i colleghi fotografi. Credo che ci sia anche magari chiedo a Thomas di aiutare. Intanto ringrazio i relatori per aver parlato, ringrazio per averci raccontato del film, ringrazio i giornalisti che sono intervenuti e i vari ospiti che sono qui in sala. Per quanto riguarda le interviste, come dicevo, è possibile farle qui in sala. A chi ci sarà saranno i colleghi a indicarvi dove trovare i vari relatori, e insieme a quelli che hanno parlato dal tavolo ci sono, come dicevamo prima, Greg e Robin, gli altri protagonisti del film, che sono qui e saranno disponibili per le interviste. Aruna Kandé dal Senegal, che sta un po' più indietro, e anche lui è disponibile, e Ridima Pandey. Welcome to all of you, and I was just saying that you will be available for interviews, and my colleagues will show you where to locate yourselves so that the journalists can come and interview you. Thank you. Thank you for being here and for your work, of course.
Vuoi dire un grazie anche ai tecnici e agli interpreti?